More tomorrow. Very big topic, very concerning. MAGA betrayed. That's what he's saying. He's warning you. He brings the receipts. Question is, are people listening, or will they complain about it after the fact? The time to act is now, to be informed. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting.
Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Howdy, I'm Daniel Betts. I remember exactly where I was when the July 4th floods hit. I had been involved in a car accident that morning. The roads had washed out. And when I got home that evening and was able to kiss my 3 beautiful boys goodnight, I turned on the news and I discovered that others were not going to be so lucky. Over 135 lives were lost that day, and I remember thinking there are real consequences when legislators fail to prioritize the needs of the people they represent. Sometimes deadly consequences. That moment changed me. It reminded me that public service is not about talking points. It's about showing up for people when it matters most. If I have one goal tonight, it's to show you that not only do I have an America First agenda, but that I will execute that agenda while putting Texans first. And if you believe in that mission, I'm asking you for your support, for your trust, and your vote. My name is Daniel Betts, and as a resident of District 21, this is just one of the stories that have inspired me to run to be our next representative. When I am standing in the halls of Congress, I will fight for you every single day to make sure that the needs of Texans are heard and felt. President Trump has seen win after win. His America First agenda is working, and the people can feel it. And as the father of 3 young boys whose future depends on the success of that agenda, you will have no stronger champion in Washington than me, and President Trump will have no greater ally. As a trial attorney, I am used to the fight. We will secure our border to stop the flow of drugs and violence. We will dismantle the institution of abortion by eliminating its incentives. We will restore American energy dominance and stabilize our grid. And we will stand firm in trade, showing the world that America will never again be taken advantage of. That is the America I want to raise my boys in. That is the America I remember. That is the America I will fight for. And that is the America of the American dream. So tonight, I'm asking you to take a bet on Daniel Betts, because a bet on Betts, I promise you, will pay out big. Thank you.
Welcome back to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview YouTube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, folks, 2026 looms large. Congressional races are emerging, and they're emerging in an environment amid of a lot of noise out there right now. Nefarious actors are stoking a fake MAGA civil war. The Trump administration keeps chalking up win after win across all departments, but there are also clarion calls to do more, especially domestically. Affordability is another watchword. A vibrant pro-American first governance and culture and a national security focus on our own interest are all being demanded by voters, especially those that are 18 to 40 years old, which is where Donald Trump won during the 2024 election cycle. And my guest today is that man right there, Daniel Betts, a lifelong Republican, a proud Texan, and a committed Christian running to represent, as you heard, Texas's 21st congressional district. He wants to bring his ideas to the U.S. House and support the president's policies. A defense attorney for over 15 years, Daniel has fought to defend constitutional rights and stand up to government overreach. Raised with pro-life values and inspired by attending the March for Life as a child, He continues that fight today. Daniel and his wife Piper are raising their 3 young boys in the Hill Country where they are active in their church and community. He knows how to stand his ground in the courtroom, and he'll bring that capability and resolve to Washington, D.C., for Texas, and really for all Americans, because we need fighters from every state. Daniel, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, well, when we first talked, a lot of the conversation was about the video of your speech there, and I wanted to just frame the discussion around your ideas around those issues, starting with the July 4th floods. What about that really energized you to enter this race? And this is Chip Roy's seat, right? He's running for AG and not going to stand for re-election.
That's correct. I like to think of it as the seat that Chip Roy sits in right now. It's the people's seat. And Chip would say the exact same thing, but he's running for Attorney General of Texas right now. And so it's an open seat and an open primary. It's a sobering thing. I can't imagine how it was in the rest of the country, but to have that be right in your backyard, something that you don't imagine would be possible, that can happen. And 135 lives is a large number. And I don't want to make light of that in any way, but for such a community so small as Kerrville, where that happened, that means that everyone lost at least someone, not that they knew, but that they were close to, and probably more than one. And it's when I go out there and I talk to them about it, I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm exploiting that harm. I want to make sure that never happens again, and figure out where those failures were so that we prevent such a tragedy from ever occurring. And not just, loss of life across the spectrum, young people, even from the Austin area, kids, children, whose lives were lost there as a result of a failure of leadership. It's a major problem, something we got to solve.
Yeah, and this is a federal seat. So what failures did you see in that event that you will be able to put pressure on and apply policy fixes to at the federal level? Just talk folks through that, a couple of those.
Yeah, great question, because I'm a constitutional conservative. And what that means is that I want us to stick to originalist constitutional principles. So the federal government shouldn't be involved in everything. The Commerce Clause should be what it originally was intended to be, which means that interstate commerce is what the Fed should regulate. They do have some purview as it relates to the police power and protecting people. So I do think that there is some role for the federal government to come in and help in the event of a disaster. But I would like to empower local governments to do the right thing. And sometimes that may mean federal grants, because what happened here, if you look at it, they knew in advance what needed to be done. There were real-time water gauges that they'd applied for grants and didn't have the money to put in. There were geo-targeted text message alerts that could have gone out, and that's something that would be very useful as well. These low water crossings need more infrastructure. Those are primarily state issues. The biggest thing that I can see at the federal level is I don't know that people trusted the information that they were getting from NOAA. And that is directly as a result of the politicization of that agency, and it's having been taken over by liberal thought, this ideology relating to climate change. And that has knock-on effects on the Republican side of the spectrum. This is a heavily Republican district, plus 12 or plus 11, depending on what happens in this midterm. But before the redistricting, President Trump took this district by 12 points. And so Republicans here don't necessarily trust the wonks that they believe are in charge of those agencies. And so we have to figure out ways that those agencies can work for Americans again, and that we can have trust in those agencies, that it's not agents of the deep state who are trying to manipulate the numbers We've heard about ghost weather stations that used to be there
Hmm.
but aren't there anymore, and they're still reporting numbers. A lot of these problems, it's the perception of impropriety that can create the issue in the first place. And so we need to ferret that out at the federal level and restore trust in the limited interventions that the federal government is making in our lives.
Yeah, and the other organization that comes to mind is FEMA. We didn't see a lot of them in the response, but FEMA has responsibilities before an environmental disaster or any civilian type of disaster occurs anyway. And we were coming off 8 months earlier, FEMA agents saying, "Don't go to houses with Trump signs in the yard," and those kind of things. So that's a big challenge. I mean, the president has talked about maybe even dismantling FEMA because he thinks, like you, that the states and the local governments are the ones where the biggest and most important decisions need to be made, and we need to figure out a way to get the resources and funding flowed to them as quickly as possible. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think that, I mean, absolutely what you said. It is horrible to be using political animus in an emergency. That's one of the most odious things that I can imagine. And there are parts of what the federal government has done in the past that are manifestly bad, evil even. But I think that a lot of the reason that FEMA doesn't work in so many of these instances of emergencies that are local in nature is just because that power enacted from afar always doesn't have the granular local intelligence that the market provides. And the reason that our founders originally invested via the 10th and Ninth Amendments, that power in the states and in the people. It wasn't intended to be in Washington or in New York before that or wherever the capital is. It's always going to be a problem. And we do see this in Austin as well, Austin being the capital of Texas,
Hmm.
and making decisions for the whole state that don't necessarily work for the local government. But the model that our founding fathers had for this great nation was that we have the states be the locuses of power, the loci of power. And the federal government is very limitedly interconnecting us, and not this overarching leviathan that it's become.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that FEMA's primary function in an emergency is to flow funding to the state and local governments. And if that gets disrupted, that process at all, it delays that. Would you support legislation? I've heard there's legislation out there that codifies that function and removes these functions of like doing what I call shake and bake training, computer based training for a few hours to FEMA agents that go out and do things like tell people not to go to Trump sign houses and those kind of things. Remove that and let the state and local guys and gals do all of that level work, but streamline the flow of funding to these governments in an emergency.
It's not something that I've considered before, but it does sound like a good idea. Anytime you have additional steps in a process like that, especially steps that are enacted by, from afar, and it's not just, where does the power that I want to flow back to the states come from? It's not just a nebulous thing that comes from nowhere. It comes from the relationships between people.
Hmm.
And so those relationships simply don't exist substantially in the way that we need them to from Washington to those local areas. They can't, based on the size of our social networks. And I don't mean like Facebook. I mean our true interpersonal interactions where somebody and you have that I can pick up the phone and get this person on the line. And so yes, I agree that if FEMA has any role, it is to effectively distribute the resources of the federal government as needed in response to unpredictable emergencies and allow those local authorities to use them effectively. We have to have tools in place
Yeah.
to make sure that there's not fraud, certainly, which is always a potential issue in any number of emergencies that we've seen from COVID to Katrina. It's definitely an issue, but I think a lot of that may be because of the federal involvement and not allowing it to be handled locally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll have to go on the back, talk about it some more on the backside of the break, but I want to get the lay of the land of the campaign of the race from you and what you're seeing now and how it looks going into the primary in the spring. And we'll be right back with congressional candidate for Texas 21, Daniel Betts, here on Training Tuesday.
Earlier this year, gun rights groups won big with the One Big Beautiful Bill, and now they're pushing for more rights for gun owners and less government regulation. In January, the $200 tax on short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and suppressors that's been in place for more than 90 years will drop to zero. But the Second Amendment Foundation, which is based in Bellevue, points out that the National Firearms Act of 1934 will still require you to fill out this form and provide your fingerprints for a government list for something it says is perfectly legal in most states. It is now working to file multiple lawsuits on several fronts, hoping for a variety of perspective from judges that will put pressure on the ATF and possibly expose what it says is the agency's very weak legal position.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast and all the social media broadcast locations where we're at, including Getter, Truth Social Plus, Facebook, Rumble, and robmaness.com even. So if you're not watching us, you can find us at any of those locations for the post-production edits of the show. My guest today is Daniel Betts. He's an attorney. It's a congressional candidate for the Texas's 21st District. Congressman Chip Roy is currently in that seat, and he's running for Attorney General in the state of Texas, so it's an open race. And Daniel, before the break, I mentioned I wanted to, from your perspective, what's the lay of the land in this race right now from a candidate's perspective? And it's an open seat, like you said, so you don't have an incumbent challenge to overcome, but I'm sure there's a lot of people in it.
Oh, that's true. You know, when Chip ran in 2018, when it was last an open seat, there were 18 challengers in the Republican primary. And I didn't know if we would get to 18. I think we were talking about the over-under being 12, and we've already got the over. We're at 13 right now. And that is, you know, we're in the filing window. Deadline comes up on December 8th. And so I think that it remains to be seen how many of those 13 candidates will actually spend the money, that $3,500 filing fee, to enter the race. And I think some of them have been getting the real and probably realistic sense on the campaign trail that they're simply not gaining traction. You know, I go to events, feels like I go to events 24/7. I was at an event last week, and there were some candidates who were there, and one of them left before we had an opportunity to speak, and was sitting in the corner not talking to anybody. And if you're at that stage, I hope that you're being honest with yourself about your chances, because, you know, any congressional seat since the Permanent Apportionment Act is growing every single year, and the number of voters that you have to reach every single year is more and more. And especially in a race like this one, where Chip announced that he was running for Attorney General on August 21st, pretty late in the cycle for people to spin up a campaign, especially with Texas having their primaries on March 3rd.
which is some of the earliest primaries out there. And so Texas has a runoff system. So if you don't get more than 50% of the vote, then you get put into a runoff. And so that runoff, the election will be on May 26th. So between now and March 3rd, nobody's going to win this race outright. That's what I see. And so between now and March 3rd, it's going to come down to the top two candidates. And so we are all vying, just like any congressional race, for the fealty, the loyalty of every single precinct chair that you can grab, every local state official, national endorsements. And unfortunately, the name of the game is absolutely money, because when those 120 days, you can't reach, even at the low end, you probably only, to win this seat, you probably only need 30,000 very solid voters of yours. I think Chip had around 25 that got him the #1 spot in the primary in 2018, and then about that many in the runoff as well, because a lot fewer come out in the runoff. And we think it's about 30,000 that you need, but even that number, low as it is, to get to those voters, you can't get to them individually. You need network effects to do it, and you need big media buys. You need mailers, and you need TV. And so in addition to hitting all those fundraisers, or to hitting all of those events locally with all the local political groups, you're doing fundraising, left and right. I'll be as soon as we get off here, I'm on a phone call with a potential donor, and then I'll be on, while I'm going to my event this evening, I'll be making phone calls all throughout the drive out to Gillespie County with Fredericksburg. So it's a lot. You have to have a heart for it. You have to have a passion for it. And it remains to be seen which of the candidates in the field have that yet. And we'll know by December 8th how big the field's going to be.
Yeah. And when's your next required FEC reporting?
December 31st. And so we'll see what the state of fundraising is then. Yep.
Yeah, you'll have a really good feel for which of those candidates that do sign up have the feel for how much money they're raising. What's the typical budget for an open seat race like this? What did Chip have to spend the first time?
Well, I mean, in this one, we are estimating that in order to win this thing, we need to have raised $1 million. And that's about 600,000 spent in the primary, 300,000 in the runoff, and then you save a little gas in the tank for the general. But this race will be won in the runoff election. I think that's pretty clear that that's the case. And there's a wide range of what people have been able to raise so far. I think Mark Teixeira and I are the #1 and #2 in terms of dollars raised in that first quarter. And various candidates say they're putting some of their own money in, and they haven't spent it yet, and they get to take it back if they don't spend it. So it always is a question of how much of a pump fake that is, or how committed they actually are. And so, yeah, it's a lot of money, and that's raising about $10,000 a day on average. And so it's quite an endeavor.
Yeah, it is. I understand. I've been there, done that. So I played the gun rights clip there at the beginning of the segment because that's part of your issues list. You're very strong on individual rights. Of course, Absolutely. It's important in the state of Texas too, inherently, and I can't imagine why. But the little clip there from the Gun Rights Foundation talked about the National Firearms Act needing more reform. And there are some that say the National Firearms Act is unconstitutional and should be challenged more aggressively. What kind of federal level reforms will you look at from a gun rights perspective to shore up the individual's right to keep and bear arms without being restricted? I mean, look, I interviewed a team that was trying to get a guy out of jail that was given no bail because he had a gun in his car. He was transiting a state and a legally owned gun and was stopped for some reason. They searched the car, found a firearm. Yeah, he was in jail for over 78 days in Massachusetts, I believe it was. But that kind of activity is a big indicator, as you said before, when the federal government gets involved, the central government is too involved in something, bad things tend to happen. What kind of changes would you like to see if you get elected to Congress?
Well, let me describe my position first. It's very easy in a Republican field to say I'm support the Second Amendment, and there's a lot of platitudes floating around in this race
Mm.
as well. I am a Second Amendment absolutist, and so what I mean by that is that we as citizens need to have access to weapons of war. I disagree with Tim Walz. I think that that is what the Second Amendment was intended for in the first place. It is a bulwark against tyranny, and in order for it to be an effective bulwark against tyranny, it needs to allow us to stand up to a modern military. That's absolutely necessary. And so, should we have access to short barrel firearms? Absolutely. Should we have access to automatic weapons? Absolutely. And so, I do think that it is a good first step to getting rid of the $200 tax on
Mm.
suppressors, short barrel firearms. A great first step. 100% agree with that, because it shouldn't have been there in the first place. But the fact that they still effectively, and it's not even a tax, it's a $0 tax. You have to fill out a form. What is that really? That's a registration requirement. That's what that is.
Mhm.
And as we know from history, if we're a student of history, registration is the first step to confiscation. That's the only valid purpose that it has. And that's absolutely what they intend, is that when the law changes back, that they can come and find who these people, where these guns are and who has them, so that they can prosecute, so that they can take them back and destroy our Second Amendment rights. So yes, I do believe that's a good first step. But what does the Second Amendment say? It says shall not be infringed.
Mhm.
The NFA is an infringement. It absolutely is. And so the NFA needs to be repealed. The ATF is a prime example of federal overreach. There is no basis in the Constitution for an agency like the ATF to exist, none whatsoever. And it's as a result of bad court decisions in the past that have allowed that overreach to take hold. If you look at the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, the Prohibition Amendment, they knew back then that there wasn't an ability for them to regulate alcohol without an
Mhm.
amendment to the Constitution. That was clear as day. And then as things have progressed over time, well, since FDR and his attempt to pack the courts if they wouldn't give him his interpretation of the Commerce Clause, things have gotten out of whack. And so I'm an originalist. I want to get back to originalist principles. And I think that it is really important to have practical ways that that affects us. The NFA, the ATF, those are easy things that we can excise from our lives, and part of the stranglehold of federal overreach that's choking us.
Yeah, that shouldn't even be one of the hard problems, in my opinion. I mean, the hard issues are the ones we're hearing about more that I mentioned in my monologue. That the 18 to 40-year-olds, especially among men and white men, I'll demographic it out. I'm not afraid to do that. I mean, they just voted for Mandami in New York City, the Islamist Marxist that won the mayor's race up there. That demographic that had gone for Donald Trump in 24 in places like New Jersey just voted for the governor in New Jersey, the Democrat, in by tens of thousands more than the Republican side. And I think that's a challenge. And we'll go ahead and start that conversation on this side of the break. But what are your thoughts on how do we get to more aggressively to the affordability issue? Because the federal government really, its involvement has generated a lot of the problems with the ability of a family to have kids and raise a family on a single income in this country and be prosperous in that environment. That's a large part because of things the federal government has done. What are your thoughts on how we need to move forward on that issue?
Yeah, Thomas Sowell, my favorite living economist, and I'll quote or paraphrase him when he said that, they thought that we couldn't afford hospitals and doctors and medication, but we could afford hospitals, doctors, medication, and a federal bureaucracy to oversee it. And it comes down to that almost invariably, adding these extra oversight steps, these extra involvement of bureaucracies. What's the largest single employer in the country? It's the federal government, and it's bloated, it's outsized, and it is the driver of costs. So I don't think that the federal solutions are primarily more interventions. I think almost invariably that's not the case. I think that it is to bring power back to the states, to find ways to get the federal government disinvolved in our affairs. And I think that's the primary thing. You know, Snap's been in the news a lot recently. And Snap, 42 million Americans monthly use Snap. So not every year, but monthly. And so if you are on...
Let me stop you right there, though, because I don't think they're all Americans that are using it. We got to take a break real quick. And I want to let you continue after this break, Daniel. We'll be right back with congressional candidate from Texas 21, Daniel Betts. It's a great conversation. Get in here.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
This morning, the USS Gerald Ford, the nation's largest and most advanced aircraft carrier, has arrived in the Caribbean. The Trump administration also announcing it blew up another alleged drug trafficking boat, this time killing 3 people in the Eastern Pacific. It's the 21st strike so far, resulting in at least 83 deaths. The Pentagon providing no evidence drugs were on board, but President Trump argues the airstrikes in international waters, both in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, are working.
We made a lot of progress with Venezuela in terms of stopping drugs from pouring in.
The show of force intensifying, with the U.S. military starting new training exercises in Trinidad and Tobago over the weekend. The massive buildup of thousands of American troops and nearly a dozen Navy ships in the region is raising questions about whether President Trump will try to oust Venezuela's authoritarian leader, Nicolas Maduro, from power. Overnight, the U.S. naming a Venezuelan cartel, which it claims Maduro leads, a foreign terrorist organization. The president asked if that allows him to target Maduro's assets.
It allows us to do that, but we haven't said we're going to do that. We may be having some discussions with Maduro.
Maduro has rejected the Trump administration labeling him a narco-terrorist and has been preparing his country for a possible American invasion. This weekend calling for peace.
Peace, peace, peace.
And even breaking into song.
Imagining us people.
While at the White House, the defense secretary and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff met with President Trump Friday, briefing him on options for potential military action against Venezuela. 2 sources familiar with the meeting tell NBC News. The president asked whether he's already decided his next move.
I sort of have made up my mind now. I mean, I can't tell you what it would be.
The president also says he doesn't think the administration needs congressional approval for potential military actions inside Venezuela, though he does want to keep lawmakers informed. For his part, Maduro denies having any ties to the drug trade and has accused the U.S. of fabricating a war against him. Craig.
Gabe Gutierrez from...
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking with our guest, Daniel Betts, who is running for the Texas 21st District congressional seat that Chip Roy currently sits in. And Daniel, before the break, you were talking about SNAP, and you said 42 million Americans were on SNAP, which is food stamps. And I interrupted you, and I said, no, I don't think they're all Americans. Do you disagree with me on that? I mean, I've seen numbers that show there are millions and millions of non-American heads of household, illegal and legal, that are on the SNAP program.
You know, I live in Texas, and I do think that Texas is doing a pretty good job of keeping them off there. But I don't doubt, because this program is administered by the states, and we've seen that in some recent, affirmed in some recent court rulings, that states like California, states like New York are absolutely using those funds to give them to illegal immigrants. You know, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I have been required by the court to represent certain illegal immigrants in the past. And I cannot identify any instance of them reporting to me they're being on benefits here. And so I would credit Texas in administering that program properly, because this money should be for Americans only. And if you believe that the program has any value, then it has to be for American citizens. There are built into that program some unfortunate, perverse incentives that don't actually allow the program to do what it should, because it shouldn't be support forever. That's not the intent of it. The intent of it is to give people enough of breathing room that they can get out of poverty. And so I do think that certain changes are needed to the program. You know, like right now, an individual gets $291 a month for groceries. And they can spend those at any number of different locations, including convenience stores. One of the first things that I would do to change the program is not allow them to spend it at convenience stores. I think that we need to be incentivizing people to, well, I mean, what do people of higher means do? We buy in bulk because you get better deals, and convenience stores exist, I think, in large part in the communities that they are. You know, talk about food deserts. Well, why isn't there a grocery store there? It's because the convenience store can sell those goods at such a high markup that it allows that real estate to be used for a higher economic purpose. But it's because of the EBT cards. It's because of the SNAP benefits, or I like how you called it, food stamps. We should call a spade a spade. These are food stamps. That's what this is. We relabeled it, given it a new shine up. But that's one easy thing. Another thing is that we want people to be brought out of poverty. That means we want people to get married. That's the one thing that has the most potential to bring people out of poverty. Well, unfortunately, if you file as two people, and if you're married, you get counted as that, the benefits per individual are less in aggregate. And I do think that we should scale them off as they go up. But I think going from 1 to 2, I do think that it should be at least the same, so that there is at least no disincentive. And I'm reluctant to change it so that there's an incentive towards marriage there, because, but I think that there shouldn't be a penalty under that system for marriage. And then, I mean, finally, the other thing that I would say about that program, that the fade out at the upper end, it fades out at 30 cents on the dollar, and we want people to be spending 10 to 15% of their income on food. That's what should be typical. And when it's 30%, like, that incentivizes people don't have the incentive to go get that job, because they say, well, I'm penalized for getting out of it. And there'll actually be a breaking point in the middle there where it'll be more difficult for me to make my ends meet than if I just stayed on food stamps. And I think that's why we see 9 million Americans fail out of the program for not meeting the work requirements within 3 months. And so there are some reforms that are needed if we're going to keep the program as it is. But yeah, I think in these liberal states, absolutely, there are many instances of illegal aliens, people who have no right to those funds, utilizing those funds and getting them directly out of our pockets as taxpayers. And that's why there's so much bloat. It's a big part of the reason why there's so much bloat there. We got 14 million American or non-Americans, legal aliens in this country, if we believe the low end of the numbers.
Yeah, I think the numbers are higher. When I ran for U.S. Senate in 2013 and 14, we were already talking about 11 to 12 million illegals in this country, and Biden let in 20 at least.
Right.
So it's a 30+ million people, which is one of the reasons why our budget is through the roof, and every deportation I think matters. quite frankly. Let's talk about
And
fentanyl.
self-deportation.
Yeah, and self-deportation. I include self-deportations in the mass deportation operation. They
Yep.
should
I
be.
think that's one thing that Trump's doing so well is
Yeah,
creating that culture that gets them to leave on their own.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about stopping the flow of fentanyl that's killing anywhere between 70,000 and 100,000 or more Americans a year for several years now, almost a decade, I think, as far as the numbers go back. And there are millions of people that would be alive today if a president had had the guts to stand up and do what Donald Trump's doing by killing these narco terrorists in their boats in international waters, just like we killed the Barbary pirates under President Jefferson when
There you
Americans
go.
were being killed and
Throwback.
their goods stolen. There's precedent for that. Where are you at on this? Look, I voted for this as a former military officer. I demand that our armed forces only be used in America's first interest. And the Western Hemisphere and our southern border is our first interest, and especially those lives that we're losing every year.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough for me. I think that what Congress needs to do their job with respect to the use of military force. But there is, like you mentioned, constitutional authority for reprisals. And we can consider this to be a reprisal. I do think it's a little bit more attenuated in this circumstance. And I would like to see more concrete proof that there are drugs, in fact, on all of these, because I mean, it's been a large number of strikes now. And it was when it was one or two or three boats, I felt a lot more comfortable with it. I'd like to see Congress get involved more, at least in an oversight role. But you're right, we are fighting a war. And if you look at Mexico, and if you look at Colombia back when FARC was there and we were, fighting a drug war there, we had 100% compliance essentially from the Colombian government. And we were fighting FARC. Well, now with the cartels, if you look at Mexico and the Mexican government have been captured by the cartels. There's no denying that. And so we are not able to be in the same situation that we were before. And if you look at the border in Texas, there's 4 states that are southern border states: California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. And Texas is unique among those states because we have much more private property rights that are an issue here that prevent us from getting full domain awareness at the southern border, to the extent that we don't have awareness in any of the 5 different domains: underground, on the ground, in the air, telecom, and cyber. So it's a major problem. I think that the bigger threat is not from the boats, but at our southern border. Right now, we are to test 16% of the semis that are coming across our border. And they know that this is a numbers game. And they are sending low-level operatives across with those trucks, who it doesn't matter to their enterprise if that person gets caught. They just send another one. Why fentanyl? A lot of different reasons. Fentanyl is very cheap to produce. It requires very little to be an effective dose. It gets you addicted very quickly. It is a short-acting high, and as a result, you need more of it. And so that's why they're putting it in all different types of products. People don't even necessarily know that they're addicted to fentanyl when they do get addicted to fentanyl. They're getting that same product from the same dealer, person, whoever it is, and they know that they need more of that because it's quote unquote working. But by the time that they realize what it is, they're already in a hole. And for those of your viewers who are familiar with someone who has dealt with opioid addiction, I can speak as a criminal defense attorney myself. It is a harrowing thing to go through, and not something that you can oftentimes get out of on your own without help, sometimes pharmacological help, but definitely community help. And so there's a reason they're weaponizing this against us. It is an incalculable toll on our society. And so as a chemist, before I was a lawyer, I was an organic chemist. I think that there are tools that we have at our disposal that we can be using to test more of these semis, or almost all of them. Raman spectroscopy is one that springs to mind, where you use infrared lasers to check for the presence of these fingerprint signatures of these substances. The Raman can be used to even peer through a clear plastic bag or into a container. And so we have a lot of tools that we're just simply not using yet that I would prefer to see us use rather than using the AUMF from post 9/11 or some other justification that may be on shaky constitutional ground to fight this war.
Well, we tried to repeal the AUMF from post 9/11, but failed in doing that. So Congress does have oversight of this operation, especially now since the State Department's declared the Maduro regime foreign terrorist organization. And that is squarely on constitutional grounds. It's been fought over before. But you're right. We need to be able to do more, and we need to bring every tool we have to bear, both from a law enforcement perspective and from a military perspective. In my opinion, this is the right way to use our military forces to protect Americans directly. And that fentanyl kills tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 Americans a year. We got to take one more break, Daniel. When we come back, I want to get into energy. Texas is big about energy, but it's not just oil and gas. And I want to hear Mr. Bett's thoughts on new types of energy that are green energy, but not that old renewable crap that poisons you and poisons your earth. A better kind of green energy. We'll be right back with Daniel Bett.
Do you appreciate all the free programming we produce here at Worldview Tube? Well, if you do, we need your partnership now. If you're already supporting us, thank you. If you're not, would you please consider doing so? We have to have a big November and December end of the year giving. Please go here right now to this website, worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. You can give through credit card. You can give through PayPal. You'll find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. You'll also find our phone number. Simply use that phone number by leaving a voicemail for Melissa or texting her, and my wife will get back with you and help you make your contribution over the phone. We send out tax receipts with our EIN number, well, the first week of February of each year. We, again, have to have a very big November and December as we get ready for pushing out more Christian worldview programming for 2026. So thank you for going now to worldviewfoundation.com. That's worldviewfoundation.com.
I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins at the White House. The rapid growth of artificial intelligence is driving up the U.S.'s demand for energy, and fast. President Trump says expanding nuclear capacity is key to keeping up. We spoke about the issue with Energy Secretary Chris Wright.
For years, millions of Americans have watched their energy bills tick upwards.
My electricity bills are higher.
The reasons vary from state to state, from wildfires to natural gas prices. Inflation's played a role too, and now energy-hungry AI data centers are adding even more demand to the grid. As big tech focuses on developing AI, companies like Meta, Alphabet, and Microsoft are investing in nuclear energy to power those systems. We spoke with Energy Secretary Chris Wright.
Big tech is a key part of the piece that's going to relaunch American nuclear power. They want their huge appetite for power. They want as much as they can get.
President Trump campaigned on expanding America's nuclear energy production to meet rising energy demands.
We will embrace all forms of energy, including nuclear. Nuclear's a great energy.
On Monday, Secretary Wright announced nuclear power projects will receive the lion's share of funding from the Department of Energy's loan program.
This is going to take private capital, private technology, private customers, but a little help from the government as well.
Currently, there are 94 nuclear reactors in the U.S., providing about 19% of the country's electricity, a share that's remained steady since the 1980s. In May, President Trump signed an executive order calling on the U.S. to break ground on 10 large nuclear reactors by 2030.
All nuclear is a hot industry. It's a brilliant industry. You have to do it right.
We're looking at locations today very carefully. And in the coming months, we'll announce locations that are going to see very large development of nuclear power plants.
Last month, the administration struck a deal with Westinghouse to invest $80 billion to build those nuclear power plants.
What do you see as the biggest roadblocks nuclear energy faces right now?
Supply chain. We have President Trump all in. We're reforming the regulatory regime. We have lots of private capital. We have government capital to match it. The problem right now is just execution. It's just having enough workers and enough supply chain to build these plants as quickly as we'd like.
President Trump has laid out a target of quadrupling the U.S.'s nuclear capacity by 2050. At the White House, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday. We're talking with Texas 21st District congressional candidate Daniel Betts, and one of the issues that he's big on is energy dominance, reestablishing that, which is a stated and known goal of the Trump administration. President Trump ran on that. Those of us that support him are advocates for new nuclear power, and not just the big reactors either, the micro reactors with the safe new technology that needs to be implemented as quickly as possible. And it's the only really true scalable and reliable green energy for all you environmental nut jobs out there. Daniel, wanted to get your take on this effort. Yesterday, Valor Atomics became the first private firm to reach a criticality test for its new nuclear reactor system that it's designed. It had help from the Los Alamos National Labs and another national organization, but still, that's a big milestone.
Yeah, I do think that modular nuclear reactor is the way of the future for so many different applications. You know, AI is big here in Texas, not because the citizens of my district want it here, but because there's just so much land. And for these data centers, you need a lot of area. There's a huge sound footprint that is associated with it. And so putting them out in rural areas makes sense in large part for these companies. But the biggest issue is the energy needs. And so if you look at the energy needs of these data centers, around 30 megawatts is what you're generally looking at. And that's just for regular operation. But when they are computing, when they're doing specifically difficult computing tasks, there will be spikes associated with it. And then there's the secondary spike that comes from cooling, which is another thing. And so all of these issues interrelate. And, you know, water is a big issue in this district. And so they all kind of cycle back on each other. So Texas is great for the opportunity to put these data centers from a feasibility perspective, because in order to handle those secondary spikes, nuclear is good to run the data center. And the modular reactors between 10 and 30 megawatts are generally what you're looking at. So it's perfect. But you also need secondary generation to be able to handle those because nuclear can't spin up fast enough for those safely, at least with our current technology. And so gas peaker plants, natural gas peaker plants are a great option. We've got the infrastructure to do that. In some sites in Texas, you can be using geothermal for that as well. And there's other technologies that allow you to do it. A big thing in this district is the battery energy storage systems that are so dangerous. These huge lithium-ion batteries that come from the subsidies, the green subsidies you're talking about for solar and for wind. And, you know, those are not good for our environment is what it comes down to. The solar, you have all of these issues with impervious cover causing flooding, for example, and an inability to use the ground underneath them. For the wind, the devastation on our bird populations. And I can speak for this district. We have such an amazing diversity of birds that come through here, and so many, you know, I'm a little bit of an amateur birder myself. And it's so devastating to see what these windmills do, not just from the blades, but from the disrupted habitation underneath. And It's crazy to think that these people that are putting these in are supposed to be environmentalists.
Yeah,
And
they're
we're the ones that are
yeah,
actually doing the conservation to say, get this crap out of here. But
yeah,
it's because of
absolutely.
those subsidies that these large battery projects are going in. These battery projects are manufactured in China by companies with ties to the CCP and modems in there that can allow them to be used as bombs in our agricultural area. That is
Mhm.
not the solution for Texas energy dominance, for American energy dominance. We need to get back
Absolutely.
to safe energy, and nuclear
Yeah,
is safe energy.
absolutely is. So we got a question from the audience that I want to go ahead and take that before we get to the end of the show. Go ahead. Drax is our host over in our live audience. Go ahead, Drax.
Go ahead. Short, sweet, nice and neat. Thank you, Colonel, and thank you, Drax. When you were talking about food stamps, here's one of the things that questions I have for you. Do you think that they ought to have to be done the same way that they do it in the WIC program, where you can only buy certain things? You can't buy junk food. You can't buy pre-cooked food. No sodas, stuff like that. I mean, this program has ruined it for senior citizens.
So you're right. The WIC program is much more restrictive, and it gives you the opportunity to buy things like milk. And this is for mothers of young children and those young children themselves. I do think that it would be reasonable. You know, I've toyed with the idea of whether or not we should only allow bulk food items to be able to be bought, to require people to, and at least there's no disincentive against it. I don't think that energy drinks, that soft drinks, are the things that people should be buying. I am also reluctant to have too much federal control over it. If we want people to be able to get out of this, we have to allow them to fail in certain ways. And so I do have a bit of a reluctance as a conservative who doesn't want involvement from the federal government in people's lives to do that. I don't know what the right answer is. I think that those three things that I highlighted are the best things that I've been able to find that we can do to do that. I think, and not having them have access to convenience stores, I think that's going to do a lot of exactly what you're talking about. If you're going to buy
Yeah.
soda, okay, buy it in bulk. You know, buy it in a 12 pack, something like that. That's much more reasonable than buying a $4 20-ounce can or whatever it is. I think that'll get us part of the way there without getting too much government control.
Yeah, I was reading a post on X before we came on. The guy was saying, "Yeah, the government makes allows people to buy the things that cause their type 2 diabetes and obesity, and then they make us pay for the healthcare to take care of those people that are getting the diabetes and obesity." And we need to come up with some answers for that. I want to go back to AI before we close the show and give you a chance to pitch for help in your race. And that is, there's a move afoot to put a 10-year moratorium on state-level regulation on artificial intelligence. Now, we've defeated it already twice at the state level and defeated it once at the federal level, and now they're trying to get it back into the National Defense Authorization Act. I think I know your answer to this. You do not support putting a moratorium on AI regulation at the state level, right? Wouldn't you prefer that's where the regulation is done?
You know, it's a tough question. If AI may be something that is necessarily interstate commerce. I mean, AI is involved in our lives already in a very huge way. I don't know if we can. I think that there is the tyranny of the minority that we've seen out of California for so many years, where their regulations end up being the regulations for the country because of their size. So I do have a little bit of a reluctance to do that. But at the same time, AI does appear to be inherently dangerous. And states should have the ability to control what goes on in their state. We've seen that, for large, with all these different states that are getting rid of the ability for minors to access pornography. That's absolutely a great thing. And so in that sense, maybe we can have that kind of be the model. I don't know what it looks like to have states be banning ChatGPT or access to it. And I think that a lot of the times people will still have access to it. I don't know what the right answer is on that, but I think that my instinct is yes. More federal control is not generally the answer. State control is the answer.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Daniel. And what's your website? Tell folks how they can get hold of you before I let you go. Got about 10 seconds here.
You can follow me on Twitter, Bets for Texas, BETTSFOR Texas.com, and that is my website as well. Donations are greatly appreciated. They help us reach voters. And if you like what you've heard today and you want me to be in Congress, then I need your support, your prayers, and your vote if you're in TX21. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Good luck. And tomorrow's Whistleblower Wednesday. Hey, we're going to have a unique guest on. I met him a few months ago at a conference. His name's Sven Sharpen. He's the founder of the Autism Freedom Network. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is such an organization, and it was created out of necessity. And I look forward to having Sven on to talk about that for the full hour tomorrow. I'll see you then.